Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Room from Periapsis Press. My husband David will be joining us shortly. Just gonna talk about random stuff today. Didn't really have a plan, and nothing really stood out to me. There's been some sort of generic drama, but I don't really have anything to add to the conversation about that kind of stuff. So we're just gonna talk over a few topics that people left in the comments to my Twitter call. Shout out asking for ideas of what to talk about today. And
hello, everyone.
I'll just start off. I don't have any slides for today by mentioning some indie news. The Magic School bundle, story bundle is still ongoing, so you can get up to 10 if you meet the required amount in order to get the extra books. You get 10 books in the Magic School genre, so that's kind of cool. I left a link in the description to my news article about it. And then one other thing that came up recently is C.S. Johnson, who wrote the Divine Space Pirates trilogy that I reviewed. The first one, I read all three, has a series called Fat Girl that is wrapping up this month and at the end of next month. So at the end of this month, the 12th book comes out, and at the end of February, the final book comes out, as I understand it. So if you're interested in that sounds interesting to you, you should check it out. One thing that I thought would be fun to do is we got some comments on our mine. David wasn't there for this one. My Magic School discussion about a couple of Trad Pub books. One was a book and one was a TV show, of course, that I thought would be fun to talk about. Just acknowledge, I guess. Swift Sword Rush said, the Magic School genre feels like a difficult genre to get into as a writer. There's a ton of people looking to be the next Rowling, for good or ill, but it feels like most people don't know what they're doing. I have an acquaintance who tried to write one, and even the synopsis made it clear they didn't really understand how to add to the genre. I don't believe it's a dead genre, though. I think there's a lot of writing space to create good characters, scenarios, environments, and plots. The genre just needs some solid indie authors. I really like Lamplighter's series, The Unexpected Enlightenment of Rachel Griffin. I think that series does that, indie author, just like you're saying, who brings something fresh to the expectations of the genre. Especially, I think, in the area of character. There's a lot of, with Rowling, there's a lot of retroactively adding stuff as she goes deeper into the series. And she leaves herself enough room in the early books that she can do that. And it ends up working for her. And we can argue about whether or not that's good writing or whatever. But Lamplighter's feels much tighter. There's far more detail in character and setting and thematic direction. So I think her work is an excellent example of what the goal is, what you're talking about here. Argamar, I think this is Black Knight.
Aragmar. Yeah, he's in the chat.
Oh, hi. I don't have the chat up. They deconstruct everything, and with such ideological fervor, though in the end they always fail to create anything worthwhile and inspirational, only depression-inducing dreck. And I I feel this about particularly about the two that I was reviewing, because you can feel how it's almost there, right? It almost has that payoff that you're looking for, that expectation. And it just fell apart partly because of the themes that they wanted to push.
So I'm not super familiar with the magic school genre other than Harry Potter, but
Yeah.
when you say payoff that you're expecting, is that a specific magic school genre payoff, kind of payoff?
I would say yes. Something that sort of encapsulates that feeling of wonder, like anything can happen.
Sure.
Like at the end of Harry Potter, like the world got significantly darker, but you still felt like there were heroes, and they did triumph,
Yeah.
And you just, I had the Golden Enclaves, that it just completely deconstructed the idea of a hero.
Okay. So that's the Naomi Novik one.
That made me so mad.
Yeah.
And then
I feel like that happened before with a different Naomi Novik series.
Maybe.
And yet you still went out and bought that last one at full price.
I blocked that from my memory.
You always wait and buy it on Amazon a year later.
A year later?
Yeah. Don't you have enough other stuff to read?
Yes. And then the other one that I did talked about in the context of Magic School was the Wednesday show.
Okay, yeah.
Which I feel like really struggled with making her a likable protagonist, and also making her dark and willing to torture people and stuff. Like I struggled with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I am excited to try the Star Shatter books as well. Paul Leon says, thank you so much for first reviewing and then spotlighting The Governess of Greenmere. I really appreciate it. I'll have to check out some of these other books ASAP too. I think that I don't just want to stop at a review, right? I have the ability to say, hey, this is what attracted me to this book and what I liked about it. And I can then say, here's another book, and it has some of the similar stuff, right? So if I can say, hey, random person who is interested in Magic School stuff, right? If you're looking for these kinds of payoffs, these kinds of elements that aren't necessarily in the Magic School genre, but are present in these other indie works, they might reach for that, right? So I'm glad that's appreciated, and I just hope that I can continue doing that. And then Matthew Pilgrim, I believe that's the Free Narnian.
Yep.
So just observing, I think splitting into different factions or schools or whatever is not only inevitable, but desirable at this point. Oh, and I thought that this was part of the Trad Pub and Magic one. But this is actually from the drama Gatekeeping and Creating Something Positive.
Oh, no.
So I thought splitting into different factions or schools.
That's very old.
That's very old. I apologize that I haven't responded to that.
Yeah, no, and I agree.
Yep.
Splitting into factions is a good thing. So yes, Matthew. Not that we have to fight, but
right.
We don't all have to find some common ground to unite around. We can do our own thing that, each do our own thing that might be related or might not be, and that's fine.
Yeah, as long as we can play nice together, I don't see the harm.
I'm not sure about that last part, if that's gonna fly, but
what?
Playing nice.
All right.
That's a 2-month-old comment.
Sorry. They're all stacked up together. Oops, wait. Don't do that. Okay. So Base Papist said that we should talk about books. So talked about a couple books so far. We will always talk about books. I'm not. I always want to bring it back to books, so never fear. This may or may not be a super long stream.
Yeah.
It's pretty cold down here.
No, you know what I have to deal with.
I appreciate you.
Oh, TJ's here. Hey, TJ.
Hi, TJ. Jonathan Schruger said apologetics in fiction, how not to suck at it. We talked about this quite a bit on the Anarchist Bible Study podcast. So if you guys are not familiar with that, that's a great show.
Yeah.
They are often in my chat as well. So you've already been brushing shoulders with them a little. So I don't know if we want to try and sum up because.
Yeah, I think, we've talked about this quite a bit. I think, let's see, just maybe some of the points that we've touched on. Speaking from experience, I think is good. So like if you can sort of bring your own experiences with religion into things and not sort of try to make, like keeping it real, I guess maybe it doesn't have to be your experiences, but if you can kind of make things grounded, that helps. Another thing is like, you don't necessarily have to stick to the Christian fiction trope of like having a character have a explicit redemption arc and conversion scene, because real life isn't always like that.
Yeah.
One thing that we talked about on that podcast was how, even, a lot of evangelicals might not even necessarily experience that sort of come to Jesus moment. I certainly didn't. I would sort of consider myself saved my whole life, but I've still had different struggles and different ups and downs in my faith and stuff. So that can be something that, characters deal with, and that's, I think, gives it sort of a more realistic thing.
I think you don't want to put your reader in the position of like a puppet, right? Like just like we don't like it when leftists try to manipulate our viewpoint into the antagonist and then argue with us, right? And they're destined to win because they wrote the story, right?
Yep.
You don't want to do that to your reader because nobody likes being in that position. I think a better way, if you want it to be apologetics as opposed to a good story, you're probably going to struggle.
Yeah. I hope he didn't mean like actually writing stories with the intent of conveying some kind of Christian apologetics as a theme. I don't know. I don't know. I would advise against that. I don't really think. I
think that I am of the opinion that stories convey the truths of the universe that God built.
Yeah.
Without you having to do too much.
Yeah.
Like forcing of it,
Well, and in my opinion, I think in my personal sort of thoughts about this kind of stuff, just making something beautiful is apologetic in sort of a sense, because we're reflecting as creatures God's creative power that he displayed in creating the world, and we can give glory back to him in that way. So I'd like to think that you don't have to be like making arguments for religion to sort of have a religious theme even to a book, or even a religious intention to a work. So I think that's what I would say about that. I'm trying to think if there are any other points that came up. I mean, flawed characters. I know people are don't always like flawed protagonists, but
yeah. And then I think one of the things that I've said before is like not worrying about getting all the theology right.
Yep.
Because your book isn't supposed to be conveying that.
Yeah.
your book will not be solely responsible for making sure your reader gets every aspect of theology correct. That's the Bible.
Yep.
And so trying to do that is just going to frustrate you.
And I mean, even people who wrote very, very, very religious fiction, like C.S. Lewis, did not feel compelled to be super theologically accurate. Not that C.S. Lewis is a very reputable theological source, in my opinion, but I mean, you can't, like with Chronicles of Narnia, there's lots of like weird random little stuff that he says that I think like even a lot of evangelicals would sort of disagree with, but everybody still likes Chronicles of Narnia because it's kind of a big picture thing, and that's an extreme case. So you don't have to walk up as close to that line as C.S. Lewis, and even he didn't feel obligated to, cross all the T's or whatever.
And I think in that conversation on the Anarchist Bible Study, I mentioned Penance as one of my favorite examples of a blatantly Christian story with an actual conversion. But like one of the things that I really appreciated about it was the moment of conversion or whatever, like when she prayed the prayer or whatever, took place off screen. You didn't go through it with her, that miraculous experience. You didn't have to be forced as a reader to try and like get that emotional high,
Yep.
So sometimes not portraying stuff is your best tool.
Yeah.
But I think that interview, we probably talked about it in a more satisfactory way because we were being asked questions, like very specific questions back and forth. So if this is a topic that interests you, I would definitely check that out. And I'll try and leave the link here sometime. Wilderness researcher wants to know about immersion in a setting. What does or doesn't work, and what do indies? What indies get it right?
This is a good question.
Yeah.
Well, can you?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. What doesn't work? Indie set. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want to start?
Sure. I think in general, something that I would say as a general criticism of a lot of pulp rev or indie type fiction that I've read is that it tends to be too light on setting. There's a real strong focus on action to the detriment of setting details. And I don't even mean world building, just having enough details that ground the action in an interesting place that you want to be in. But there are still a lot of examples of people that do it really well. And I think the people that do it well are people who do prioritize setting in their works. So Fenton Wood's Pirates of the Electromagnetic Waves is real strong, kind of weird alternate history kind of setting.
Yeah.
I think you learn some things later that show it's not exactly alternate history. But it's a very strong setting. But the book is kind of, at least the first book is kind of about the setting.
Yeah, it feels very much about a place.
Yeah.
Kind of like Tom Sawyer or one of those books that you read as a kid where it has a very rich sense of place.
Yep. And I think one thing is I think maybe people are sometimes afraid to describe settings in detail because they're afraid it's going to drag down the story or whatever. And something that I read that I sometimes think a lot about is in Ursula K. Le Guin's writing book. She talks about story not as plot, but just something that, like a narrative that has a direction. So you don't always have to move your story forward with only action or conflict.
Yeah.
There can be exposition that also has a narrative pull. And I think a lot of stories use that narrative pull of wanting to learn more about the world or discover a mystery or figure out how it works really effectively. And I think that's something that more indies could do. And I mean, you can go too far, right? I think there's probably a lot of trad pub fantasy that's just, just way too long on descriptions and being Baroque and artsy and stuff. So it's a balance, obviously, but
one of the reasons that I prefer like text books, physical / ebooks, to like audiobooks is because a lot of times if I feel like, okay, this description is going on a little too long, I just skip, right?
Yep.
I can see, okay, there's going to be dialogue down here. Just, scrape my eyes across the next couple paragraphs, get the gist of what is being described, and go to the next bit of something that is more interesting, compelling to me. So I don't think that authors need to shy away in the fear that readers are going to be bored and close the book.
Yep.
I think they're more likely to close the book if the dialogue and the action doesn't hold up than because you had a long paragraph about what something looks like.
Or for me, I mean, I don't know if I call myself a typical reader, but I probably have quit reading a lot of books just because they didn't have an interesting setting more than anything else, right? If I just don't feel like it's unique or interesting, and it just seems like something very generic, I mean, I'm not going to keep reading it.
Yeah.
So.
And let's see, we mentioned Fenton Woods. I think Frederick Gero Heimbach. Gero?
You really need to figure out how to pronounce these people's names. Just say Fred Heimbach.
Fred. I think his books have a really strong sense of place as well. They tend to be quirkier, alternate history type.
Yeah. Well, in his books, I would say this, another thing that I would say is that, if your story kind of flows from your world or setting, that's really good. Right. So and that kind of relates to what I said before, right? If the story is coming from the world, then that world is the world itself is kind of linked into whatever narrative pull the plot has, and vice versa. So you don't have to maybe worry so much about exposition being. I feel like some people sort of think the two are separate. It's like, oh, I have this plot, and then I have this setting, and they're kind of separable.
Yeah. I think
Patrick's here. He didn't see any posts.
Hi, Patrick.
I'm gonna blame Twitter.
I think that, like, if you think about like stage plays, if you've ever been to a Shakespeare play, nothing or nearly nothing that you see on the stage other than the actors themselves is in the notes. It's really Spartan. You can do Shakespeare with nothing but bodies out in the park. That's why they have Shakespeare in the park all the time. The addition of set pieces, backdrops, costumes, all of that is to add richness. And it can add a tone. So if you've seen like Hamlet with David Tennant, the tone is very drab, kind of drear, because of the very boxy, dark gray wall castle feel. It's very enclosed feeling.
Can you mute for just a second?
Yeah. Let me.
Sorry, guys.
Just,
I'm
a
little sick.
I don't know where my mute button is. All right. Our kids got sick, and then David did, and I'm sure I'm next.
That's fine.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm getting the sniffles, Black Knight. I think the worst of it was today, though, and I pressed through, so I think we're good for the rest of this week. Patrick, way over in Ohio, got his cold from us. Wouldn't it be funny if the internet worked that way? You could, you're listening to live streams and stuff. I listen to live streams all the time, and I can't imagine if I was like in the same room with all those people. It'd be funny. Oh, that's right. He's in Michigan. What am I thinking? I'm thinking of Fred. I think is in Ohio, and I think BasedCon is in Ohio, right?
Is Josh in Ohio?
No, Josh is in Iowa.
Iowa. Who else has really good settings? A lot of
Alexander Lean does a nice job with his.
Yeah.
I think his stuff isn't maybe as, he's not super Baroque, but it's a setting that serves the story.
Yeah.
And I think he puts a lot of thought into making things consistent and everything. So
I'm not making homemade noodles. So I'll tell you right now. There's a box of ramen in the storage room. Sorry, babe.
It's the only stuff that's left is chicken.
I'm sorry.
And
I'll get you some beef ones. Do you want the beef?
I'm fine.
Okay. I really liked the setting for the Nutcracker trilogy by Paul Thompson. That one is I'll talk about the first one just because I know there's people in the chat who are reading it right now and I don't want to spoil anything inadvertently. Has a magic side that is wizards and wizard houses and mundane school, but he's in the group of kids that all have magic and are practicing magic behind the scenes. And then there's the city where they do their shopping and stuff. That's very Dickens, A Christmas Carol feeling. And that those two setting elements work to craft the tone, and then the story that then takes place in those places, right? Like it flows from the setting, like David was talking about earlier. In general, I've been very, very lucky with reading good settings from indie books.
Yeah.
I think I don't think it's generally something that indies that I've interacted with tend to struggle with.
Yeah.
I think mostly the people who have Spartan settings tend to be that way on purpose. The pulp rev emphasis more on the action and the
and that's fine. I mean, I like settings. Setting is a huge part of why I read stories, but it's not everyone is like that, and people can write different things for different people. So
Yep. Wilderness researcher said alternatively. That's not what he meant, but Tolkien, isn't he swell? And
Yes.
now we've mentioned Tolkien, so that's good.
Oh, it's Doug Wise is in the chat, and that is that person. Who's that again that posted that question?
Wilderness researcher.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Hi. Since Tolkien's been brought up,
Oh, geez.
Actually, the next comment I have here is from Thousand Masks, Michael Moorcock's thoughts on romantic fiction. I'm not super familiar with Michael Moorcock. I just know about Epic Pooh, and so I don't have a lot of sympathy for his view. Now that it's been brought to my attention again, I might go out and buy the book.
Yeah.
But I'm the things that he criticizes Tolkien and the Inklings for are the things that I like.
Yeah.
So it's he has a very different idea of what makes a book attractive and good than I do. So I think I will probably go buy the book and then maybe take notes and collect my thoughts and come back to you with something a bit more fleshed out.
Huh. I don't have anything to say about
Yeah.
Moorcock either. I know a little bit about him. I've heard a lot about his works. I haven't read any of it, and I know people like it. Kind of doesn't sound like my thing from what I've heard of it, so I'm not. It's not super high on my priorities list, but I know a lot of people talk about Elric a lot, and
yeah, I can't agree with his conclusion that Tolkien, particularly Lord of the Rings, is more about comfort than challenging.
Yeah, it's very strange.
I come from a different worldview, I guess, on that. So the idea of comfort being sort of the opposite or excluding challenge, and that doesn't align with my impressions of Tolkien's writing. So but maybe I will read that and get back to you with more in-depth analysis. I don't remember what the name of his book is.
He has a nonfiction book?
Yeah. Epic Pooh was an article, and it's in there.
Sure.
So it is revised, but
yeah, I don't understand. I feel like I've gotten little bits and pieces of what Moorcock's view is on things, and I feel like my conception of it, it's very contradictory. So I either don't understand what he is about, or he is working on some different definitions of things than I would use.
Yeah.
And I always think it's kind of interesting because I feel like a lot of the Pulp Rev guys really like Elric, and most Pulp Rev guys like Tolkien a lot, even though maybe they don't necessarily try to emulate certain aspects of him.
Yeah.
And I've always found that kind of to be an interesting sort of contradiction, given what I understand to be Moorcock's kind of dismissal of theme in stories, and yet he seems to have created something that really resonates with people. Maybe it's a Alan Moore, Rorschach from The Watchmen kind of resonating with people for the wrong reasons kind of situation. I don't know, but that's my general impression of that.
Yeah. All postmodernists and nihilists crap on Tolkien because they can never create anything even remotely close to his level of greatness.
Oh yeah.
No apology.
Tell us how you really feel.
Isn't he swell? Solid Helen? Is that how you pronounce that?
Solid Halon,
Halon.
I think.
What about parameters, topics that make a book appropriate for children
This is
or
interesting.
for all ages? Like, is some swearing okay? How much violence is too much, etc.? This might kind of relate to my points that I made this week about how I think that all books should be adult books
Yeah.
and some should be children's books. I think that the idea of books that don't appeal to adults or are not written for adults but are only written for children is kind of weird. I think that a good book should have something that, and I think that something is like that nugget of truth, right? That resonates even after you are no longer in that stage of life that, you know, the silliness appealed to you or whatever, you know. As far as what makes a book like appropriate for children or for all ages.
Yeah. That's tricky.
Yeah.
I'm not sure anything is appropriate for all ages. Like, there's definitely stuff that I think I would show to, you know, I would show or read to a 10-year-old that I wouldn't show to my daughter who's
2.5.
2.5. Because there's a lot of things that she doesn't really understand yet. Like, she doesn't really understand death too well yet.
Right.
And I mean, she's going to learn about it someday, but I don't want to make that like a regular part of her experiences, like thinking about death right now.
When she found that dead frog this summer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cute and very sad, and
Yeah.
it really makes you think about how we take stuff like that for granted and how death is very wrong in a lot of ways. But yet it's like it's definitely a good part of stories, right? Self-sacrifice. You know, a lot of really great stories of noble sacrifice, and you know, the story of Christianity, right, is the ultimate example of that. But you know, and I think that's appropriate for older kids, but I don't really want that to be the basis of my 2.5 or 3-year-old's entertainment right now.
Right.
I'm introducing her to Star Wars, and I've pictured Star Wars as like pretty kid safe my whole life, and I'm starting to show her things. I'm like, this is kind of like, it's dark at times and violent, and people are dying, and you know, people are threatening each other, and you know, it makes you think, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I guess long way to say I don't really think there's anything. Well, there's not very much that I think is truly appropriate for all ages, because I don't want to bring some of that stuff into my little tiny kids' entertainment right now. Not that it would be necessarily wrong. I just don't think it's necessary. She has other things to think about right now other than that stuff.
I read her The Boxcar Children, the very first one, and she loved that. And we're not talking epic, but like that's one that has been around for a while. It's not like it's a fad or whatever. The problems in it are very run-of-the-mill, everyday sort of problems, and the world that it takes place in is a older country, you know, than what we have now. It's smaller community, people who trust each other. So that appeals to her the exploring the woods, discovering
Sorry, guys.
discovering a dump and collecting stuff out of it. A chipped pink cup, that kind of stuff. And it appeals to me as an adult because I remember doing that kind of thing as a kid, like tromping through the woods and building forts. And I feel like I am conveying to her as we're reading together, a sense of like an older worldview that might not be in other books that are more modern, right? Like, so that's what I'm saying when I say that books should be for both kids and adults.
Yeah.
But not like that same book might not appeal to 10, 11, 12-year-old who's like ready for something different, right? Something that's a bit more challenging thematically, as well as like reading level, that kind of stuff. As far as content, I think that is definitely and should always be left in the hands of the parents. You know your kid.
Yeah.
I had nightmares as a kid for a really long time. And so my mom was careful about the stuff that she let us watch on TV and stuff.
And with our daughter, it's kind of interesting how she'll be totally cool with some things, and then other things will kind of rub her the wrong way. So an example of this is we've watched through pretty much like the first 50 episodes of the original Pokemon series, which gets really crazy and it goes really off the rails and there's some wild stuff in there, but she's pretty much fine with that. And then a while ago we were watching the third Harry Potter movie, I think, and we don't usually let her watch movies, but we let her watch a little bit of the beginning of each of the first couple of Harry Potter movies just to get a feel for it. And the scene where, or was it? No, it was the second one. With Dobby.
We let her watch some of the stuff that's like in the house, not like before he goes to school.
The scene where Dobby made the cake float and dump on the evil aunt or whatever.
No, it was their guest. It was just a random person.
Oh yeah, I always mix up the second and third movies. Okay, so that scene with the cake, that was just too much for her. She was bawling because she was really worried by it.
She loved Dobby. She was not afraid of Dobby, even though he's a little bit CGI,
But I think it was like she couldn't quite compute. It seemed like probably to her, it seemed like just a really wrong thing for him to do.
A huge mess.
Like he made a big mess. He wasted a nice cake, right? Our little girl can misbehave a lot of times, but she's generally like pretty careful and conscientious about things.
Yeah.
So I think that just really rubbed her the wrong way. And I mean, she's seen Pokemon, she's seen Team Rocket do all kinds of terrible hijinks and all that stuff, but that kind of was too much for her. Yeah. So I think it really has to be like on a case-by-case basis with your kid.
Yeah.
Doug Wise says, "I'm afraid of Dobby." There's been some really good comments in the chat about this stuff. So Patrick was mentioning the Tripod series, which I have not read, but I've heard really good things about. And I think the first one actually was once in Hans Schanz's book sale.
Okay.
It's a Trad Pub book that I think came out in like the 70s or 80s or something. Maybe later, I'm not sure. But my mom had actually read it. And then he's also mentioned 1984 and the Chocolate War and My Side of the Mountain. I have read My Side of the Mountain. I've not read the Chocolate War. I've read parts of 1984. And then Black Knight had an interesting comment. He's dropping a lot of fun references to his fictional world. He says a proper Terran will never shield their child from reality. So, and then also Patrick was talking about he's skipping certain parts of the Bible. So, I think I would describe what we're doing with our kids not as necessarily shielding them from reality. We mainly read to our daughter from storybook Bibles. And we don't skip over the stuff that talks about people getting killed or dying or whatever. But that's not entertainment. I don't feel the need for my daughter's entertainment to have a lot to do with violence and death at this point.
Yeah, kind of related to Patrick's comment about original sin. It's like that famous quote about like children know that there are dragons. Like we don't need to show them that they're dragons.
Another example of that sort of context appropriateness that I was going to give was like something we talk about a lot is sex in stories. And one of the reasons we talk about this is because my stories have sex in them and deal with themes of sex. And I think, I'll just say when I was a teenager, I was super horny and probably would not have been good for me to read books that had a lot of sexual themes, even if they were handled in a good way. But as a little bit older adult, I'm not so horny. Not everything that I read that deals with sex is like arousing or makes me think bad thoughts anymore. And now it's an interesting topic to write and read stories about. So, I don't think stories that have those themes are appropriate for kids, but I think there's still themes that are worth writing stories about. Kids don't really need to be thinking about that stuff, I would say, in my opinion. It doesn't need to be a part of their entertainment or what they do for relaxation or fun to be thinking about those kind of heavy themes. But maybe for an adult, it can be part of what you would consider entertainment.
Yeah. And my kids are young right now, so my ideas will probably change as I become more familiar with them at those ages. But one of the reasons that I really liked anime was the way that in the
Fiona Wolf's here.
Hi, Fiona Wolf. In the way that a good anime, sort of your generic ones, that everybody's seen.
The anime tropes in general.
Yeah.
Too.
Handled attraction and sexuality. I'm not talking like the dirty anime, right? Like that's out there, obviously.
Yeah. Or even like more adult focused stuff.
Right.
Right.
But the anime tropes relating to attraction and the way that characters are drawn, particularly female characters. It was like saying men and women are different, and there is this element to relationships between them that exists, without being in your face about it and making it a big, dramatic, uncomfortable thing. Usually making it humorous.
Yeah, not making it more than it has to be for the appropriate age of the characters, right? That's something that I think a lot of anime is really good at.
Yep. If you think about American shows or Western TV that has young characters that get together in relationships or whatever, like that drama is so intense, and that just is just not a part of your generic sort of adventure anime. It's a lot more about friendships and but that element is still present without being overblown. So, but again, you have to know your kids.
Yep. And I'm sure it'll be different between our kids too.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that there's going to be a point where there's some stuff that my son is pretty comfortable with where my daughter might not be, and vice versa. So
Yep.
I think just to make a general comment though, because the question was kind of how you do that, right? I think a good answer to that is, what do you want to see for, think about what you want to see for your kids.
Yeah.
You know, like what would you want to see in a book for your kids, and then write that,
Mhm.
you know. And don't worry too much about what other people think is appropriate, within reason, obviously.
Yeah.
But you know, just like indie fiction for adults is kind of about writing the stuff that you want to see, I think you could do the same thing for kids.
Mhm. And I think that the way that like movies are rated, thinking about like specific instances of the F word, or
Yeah.
so many swear words, or heads rolling, or that isn't really how books work. Like if you know your kid struggles with something like a mess being made, right?
Yeah.
As a 2.5-year-old, then maybe a book that has a mess in it is going to be inappropriate for them. So if you have like a horny teenager, right?
Yeah.
Like any amount of sexual content is going to be too much.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Or even just things like, you know, in terms of theme,
Yes.
are there character flaws that maybe aren't wrapped up neatly that would maybe bother a kid? I think that's something that we see in our daughter, is like she kind of wants to know what happens to things or people, or, you know, and I could see something, you know, if you wrote something kind of ambiguous, that could really bother a kid.
Mhm.
And it's not even like an issue of the content or the theme being bad. It's just sort of the particular balance of things, maybe.
Yep.
You know, I think adults maybe are a little bit better with ambiguous things,
Mhm.
maybe feel better about kind of imagining their own endings, where kids may not be.
Right. Yep. I've heard, since I became an adult, right? So, and it's all from the internet. So take that as you will. I've heard that what makes nightmares like so dramatic for you, especially as a kid, is that your brain is supplying problems, but the solution part is turned off. And so what you need to do when your kid wakes up with a nightmare is to talk them through solutions to the problem that they dreamed, which is great if they had a dream that makes any kind of sense. But if you think about a story in that way, if there's sort of a problem that doesn't get solved, that leaves that open-ended, sort of ambiguous ending, like that could stick in your head like a nightmare.
Yeah. Yep. I remember a few books like that I read as a kid that had kind of troubling endings.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like kind of going back to your discussion about the movie ratings thing, you know, those don't really capture thematic issues. You could have like a very clean PG-13 movie that just has, you know, really immoral themes or something like that. So I think it can come down to both content and the actual thematic message.
And I think the presence of sin in a story is not in and of itself something to forbid a child from participating in, for the same reasons that it isn't for Christians who are adults. We know that, you know, if someone swears, well, we don't talk that way.
Yep.
And we as adults know that there's lots of broken relationships out there, and we're called to not behave that way, right? So,
and I am kind of actually interested in exposing my kids to some of that stuff and teaching them you know, the context and why we don't do it,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want them to be, you know, guilt stricken encountering that stuff later in life.
Yeah.
You know, like they're gonna meet people who swear a ton, and that's not like a good reason to not be friends with that person or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or like for me, I'm a musician, but I didn't really listen to a lot of good music until I was in college because I mostly listened to Christian music. And you know, not all of that is like thematically good, but I think you can make a case for it, a lot of it being good anyway, despite some of the thematic stuff or problematic themes or foul language or whatever. And I kind of want to get our kids going onto that so they don't have that hang up. I think our kids are going to be good musicians, so I want to expose them to good music from a young age.
I have a vivid memory of just like, I think I was in 4th or 5th grade. I'm not sure which, because in elementary school I was public schooled, and 4th and 5th grade was like they had leaping classes where the same teacher would teach 4th and 5th grade, and then another teacher would be opposite them. So I have a memory of who was there, but I don't know which year it was. Just a horrible couple of days, because I had heard my mom swear. First time in my life. Because one of my little sisters had peed on the floor. They were potty training. And it must have just been a bad day. I'd never heard her swear before. I don't think I've ever heard her swear since. But like, that completely shook my worldview, because I thought that kind of thing was unforgivable.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to talk that way.
You have that idea as a kid that, you know, when somebody does something bad, that means they're a bad person.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, I grew up reading a lot of Focus on the Family stuff that talked about music, and you're like, okay, this music has swearing in it and it's kind of dark, so it's bad music. You know, that's sort of an attitude that I had as a teenager, and I don't think that's a healthy attitude. And I don't want my kids to have that. I mean, they don't need to dive into really grim stuff when they're little kids.
Right.
I know there's a lot of stuff that I know a lot of my friends were listening to when I was like in middle school and high school, that I'm actually going back and listening to some of it now. It's like, you know, this is not good music, but it's not appropriate for middle schoolers, right? But that kind of oh, this has a bad word in it, so it's bad. Or, you know, I just today I just got it in my head to look up some music that I like on Plugged In, and the reviewers I just don't understand how they think, because they're like, well, you know, it's like this music, there's sort of a light side to it, but there's also this dark side, and it's kind of confusing. Like, why would somebody write these lyrics that say, you know, bury me alive, or you know, I'm gonna fail or something? It's like they wrote those lyrics because that's how they felt, right? And that's what they wanted to convey. It doesn't mean it's bad music, and it doesn't mean that they don't have any hope, or that somebody who listens to that music is gonna just be dragged down or down in the dumps. It's just, that's what that song is about, right? It's about that feeling, or that he was going through a time where he felt like that. You know, it's an odd worldview, I think.
Yeah.
So I think kind of applying the same thing to stories. I mean, I think probably for little kids, I'd want themes to be a little bit neater.
Yeah.
But I don't think that ambiguous or dark themes necessarily mean something is bad. and kids shouldn't read it.
Mm-hmm. I think context matters too.
Mhm.
Our daughter really likes Skippy John Jones, who is a little bit of a troublemaker, and my mom bought her some more of the books for Christmas, and one of them starts with Skippy John Jones coloring all over the wall, and right away there's that consequence, right? Like his mom is mad about it, and she sends him to his room, right? So like that hasn't bothered her. It's like that she knows that that is a problem.
Mhm.
She is aware of that, but it doesn't upset her like the cake did. There's like a thematic closure there.
Mhm.
So an age appropriate thematic closure.
Yeah, and the context is more humorous too.
Yes.
I
Yep.
think when we were watching Harry Potter, you know, we usually watch things on a laptop sitting up in the
Yeah.
living room, and we were downstairs, the lights were off, sitting in front of the big TV, and it was kind of serious in tone.
Yep.
Right? And the music, you know, the music is kind of creating this mysterious, tense tone, right? Where something like Skippy John Jones is, the illustrations are silly, it's goofy. The whole
Yeah.
premises of those books is silly,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think she has an understanding of that. She would, if you asked her if Skippy John Jones was silly, she would say yes.
Yep. Patrick brings up terrible, horrible, no
Yeah.
good, very bad day.
He's complaining about it not having any resolution, and I say good. Kids need to learn that the world is terrible. Sooner the better.
A book that someone...
What do you mean? It has a resolve. He goes to bed and he thinks that the next day is going to be better, right? Am I misremembering the end of that book? And I think he thinks about how his parents love him, and
well, it's been a long time since I've seen that book. A children's book that bothers me is someone gave my daughter when she was very, very small. So it was kind of a gift to me. A hardcover book with a dust jacket, so it wasn't really intended for her to read for herself. But it's called Penguin Problems, and it starts out with this penguin complaining about everything, being too cold. Everybody looks the same. Just page after page of just random complaints. And then a walrus overhears and tries to help the penguin get a change in perspective by pointing out the beauty of nature and the things to be thankful for. And the penguin, after the walrus leaves, the penguin's like, okay, I'm gonna try this, and does go through a couple of things that are good to be grateful for, and then on the very last page of the book, it's I'm too cold, my toes hurt. It's okay, so I feel like children's books have gotten away from actually telling a good story in favor of being funny. It's just, I didn't think it was very funny, so. But it's along the same lines as having a resolution, I feel like.
Yeah, I looked at the Alexander book, and it basically just ends with him going to bed, and it's his mom says some days are like that, and then he's falling asleep in it, even in Australia, right? Because there's this reference to Australia.
Oh yeah.
So it doesn't really have a positive ending explicitly. I still think it's a good book. I think that
I always liked it.
I think the
Kid.
fact that I look back on it positively and I remember it having a positive ending is evidence that there's some thematic stuff there at work that sort of says it without saying it. But
Well,
that's just my opinion.
part of it, I feel like part of that ending, and we could talk about age appropriateness again. Like, is the fact that that kind of ending
Yeah.
exists, is that going to bother your child?
I wouldn't read that book to our daughter.
I think it would bother her.
I think she would be really bothered by it.
Mm-hmm. But the
Patrick almost had a brain aneurysm from it. That's a really horrible, no good, very bad day. A brain aneurysm.
But that kind of ending, it conveys something different than it's like a different kind of comfort, right? It's not, hey, things will get better, or hey, it could have been worse. It's just, it was just a day.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as the terrible, horrible, no good, it's just a day.
And it's his mom says some days are like that. If I remember right, Alexander, he lives in a functional family with a mom and a dad and siblings.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have the best day, but his mom says some days are like that. His mom's not saying get over it.
Yeah.
Life sucks. His mom says some days are like that, but he's obviously thinking about what his mom says.
Yep.
And I don't know. I think he's going to sleep looking forward to the next day being better.
Yeah.
Looks like Black Knight signing off. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to see you in the comments.
Oh, Patrick's he's going for the nightlight now. Just like life, it burns out. So, yeah. So what does the marble going down the drain signify?
Oh boy. I don't know how much crossover there is, but I feel like I'm on the edge of a lot of discussions that almost apply to us. So like a whole bunch of people were talking not quite.
Oh no, shots fired from Doug Wise. He wakes the next morning to that 1970s wood paneling. All days will be no good. Wow.
What? This is the height of fashion in home interiors. This was actually in our living room, not when we purchased the house. Actually, I said it's still in our living room, but it's been drywalled over. I said when we bought the house, I said that's good because someday
he's walking it back now. He says he grew up with it too, and it's great.
I think when we bought the house, I said it's good that it's still back there because someday we're gonna sell this house to a nice young couple, and they're gonna say, "Wait, there's wood paneling underneath this. We're gonna rip all this out. We're gonna refinish. It's just gonna be gorgeous, just like the 1970s." I like it in here in the basement. It makes it feel.
Yeah.
I think it feels cozy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna work on covering some of it up back here with art and stuff, and try and fill this with actual indie books. I only have the Nutcracker trilogy right now, so it's the only one that I've bought so far. I have a lot of ebooks and trad books that I've collected as an adult. So
review copies,
yep, of it for indie. So now I'm thinking about getting into doing a little bit more of a visual component to my indie promotion, and part of that is having stuff to hold,
Yep. Patrick's shilling our book for us, so now that he's mentioned it, we should get it down. So
it's still the
Yeah, if you want to support us, you can buy Periapsis Christmas. Christmas is long gone, which is a good thing in my opinion, but you can still buy this book in both physical and ebook form for a good price. Get both. Patrick says. Yeah, and honestly, I think these stories are good enough that you're going to enjoy them, reading them any time of the year.
Yeah.
It's not a book that you have to. Christmas was a good excuse to commission these stories and put out this book, but they're not stories that are going to lose their appeal when it's not Christmas.
Yeah.
So. Anything you want to say about it?
Nope. You did a great job. Patrick did a good job.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So that actually gives you guys a little bit of a hint into the direction I'm thinking of going this year. Is a little more of a visual component.
Yep.
I made an Instagram account, the same as my Twitter, @RedHedgeDragon. I've got one image up that I took ages ago and posted to Twitter, so you've probably seen it before. But it is my intention to do pictures of me holding indie books, pictures of indie books without me in the picture. Just going to be doing pictures to give people more opportunity to discover indies. Because I can't do too much art. I did a fan for one of the books that I read. This one is for The Devil's Dictum by Fred. But it took a lot of time. Like I have a lot of hobbies, and one of them is reading and reviewing, and I need to focus on I need to focus, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And but I still want to try new things and different things. So
well, is that all the questions?
I think so. I don't think anyone's added anything since we've been talking. But thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
And feel free to send me questions or topics whenever, because we love to be responsive with you guys.
Yeah.
And have discussions that you guys care about.
And lately there hasn't been too much drama on Twitter, so not a lot of obvious bait for conversations. I think, I don't know, I'm kind of feeling like a lot of what's been said has been said, and it's kind of a year for doing, which is great.
Yeah.
Doesn't bode well for
talking
a live stream. So if anybody has questions or topics or anything, we'd love to hear about it.
And feel free to if you come across articles or stuff like that and you're like, oh, Katie would totally have something to say about this. Feel free to tag me. I don't mind. All right. I think we better call it off. I think we're both fading.